Excellent. Welcome to the Getting Credit for Method Development webinar. I am going to share my screen. There we go. So, as I just said a moment ago, I'm Lenny Teytelman. I'm one of the co-founders of Protocols.io, scientist by training, and my colleague, Dr. Himanshi Yadavanshi, is here as well. I'll be presenting this as Dr. Yadavanshi joined Protocols.io recently, but she is going to be able to answer questions. Feel free to put things into the chat or the Q&A as we go along. But we'll also have plenty of time for Q&A for the questions at the end of the webinar. As we get started, just a few housekeeping things. As I mentioned, we are recording this webinar. We will be sharing the slides and the recording for everyone who's attending and everyone who registered for the webinar. So you should get that today or tomorrow. And if you would like, there is closed captioning that is available in the Zoom webinar panel, and it has translations that can be turned on. So if you'd like to turn it on in one of, I think, 40 languages that are supported by Zoom, I'll show you in the next slide how to do that. And then the captions, instead of being in English, will be synchronously translated. As I said, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. And I also wanted to mention that this is not an introductory webinar on Protocols.io. This webinar is specifically about publishing and getting credit for your method development. It's aimed more at the academic audience. If you're in biotech or pharmaceutical, you're probably not going to be publishing. It's very rare for you to have the permission to do that, but there are a lot of industry people that use Protocols.io as well. But this webinar is aimed specifically at those that are interested in getting credit and sharing publicly. We offer different webinars every month, so take a look at the link on webinars on Protocols.io. And if you're new to the platform and you have questions about specific features, how to use the editor, how to do sharing, anything relating to the tool itself, we are not going to be going over those features exhaustively on this webinar, but in addition to the introductory and advanced webinars that we offer every month in different time zones, you can also go and request a one-on-one demo. So you'll see the link here. And on the day and time of your choice, you can connect with one of our customer support or scientists for a demo or any specific questions about the platform. So do take a look at these resources. And if you need language support, as I said, at the bottom of the screen, you can enable captions. So if you mouse over the Zoom window, there should be a Show Captions button, and you should be able to turn on translation. Let me actually make sure that this works. We recently added this. On Zoom, so I want to make sure that it is working. Oh, hopefully it now works. So if you click on captions, um, over here, you should be able to select the language. and there are a lot of languages that are supporting. So if that is helpful, please feel free to turn it on. I know that we have a pretty global audience, so whether it's Chinese, Japanese, Hindi, you can easily turn on automatic translation. All right. So with that out of the way, and please ask any questions if you have them in the chat, as I said, or save them for the Q&A at the end. So we are going to talk about a lot of sharing on Protocols IO specifically, but we'll also touch on ways of getting credit for your method development beyond Protocols IO itself. And I want to start a little bit historically, just in the introduction, in terms of what I call a renaissance of method development. And what is interesting is that if we go back 30 years, it was actually quite unusual for people to publish protocols other than in books. There was no nature methods, there was no Cold Spring Harbor protocols. And I have the pleasure of knowing the co-founder of founding editor of Nature Methods, and she told me that in 2004, when she was launching Nature Methods, there was actually a lot of skepticism and a lot of colleagues at Nature. It wasn't Springer Nature yet, it was Nature at that point before the companies merged. And there was the feeling that people only publish research, no one needs to publish protocols. You can just get in touch with people easily. It's not worth a separate publication. So not everyone believed that this would be a successful journal. And of course, it is one of the premier journals now in the Nature portfolio. So the skeptics were wrong. And what I find particularly encouraging is that it's not just Nature Methods, but if we look at the last um, 20, 30 years, there's actually research that shows that some of the most highly cited papers in biology and biological sciences turn out to be those that focus on techniques and laboratory methods. And if we look at the last 15 years, it's not just nature methods, but there has been a sort of explosion in journals and avenues for sharing protocols, having them peer reviewed, and getting full credit for method development work. And that's been a big change in the last 30 years. It's not just from Springer Nature, but you can see from Elsevier, Cell Press, you have Star Protocols. Another one from Elsevier is Methods X. Cold Spring Harbor Protocols launched around the same time as Nature Methods. They're independent efforts like Bioprotocol. There are major publishers. There is a journal called Jove, which is the Journal of Visual Experiments that I think started in 2006 or so. And that one allows for sharing of video methods. So all of this has sort of come online over the last 20 years and really redefined the ease with which we can get credit for method development. Protocols IO that I'll talk about because it's very near and dear to my heart. For obvious reasons, as a co-founder, Protocols IO is not a journal, so it is different and works together in collaboration with journals that you might want to send your papers to. So we'll talk about that in this webinar, but Protocols IO is different because it is a platform, and I'll say a little bit more about it in the next slides. The other thing that I find particularly encouraging is when we were starting Protocols IO, um, we launched in 2014. The idea was in 2013, so more than 10 years ago, when we were starting it, conversations around reproducibility at conferences, on panels, conversations around reproducibility always focused on um, data and code and the importance of sharing them and the findable, accessible, reusable, fair sharing really focused on data and code, and people were forgetting methods. And it is really good to see over the last 10 years that the conversation has shifted, and there is more and more recognition from publishers, from funders, and different stakeholders that it's not just the data and code, but the methods, the protocols that are used to generate the data are also important when we're talking about open science and reproducibility. There are, from United Nations, UNESCO, there are recommendations on open science that were published not long ago that talk about the importance, highlight the importance of sharing our methods. From the European Commission of the European Union last year or a year and a half ago, there was a paper published, proposal for funders, universities to require and promote the sharing of methods. And this really is highlighted by the fact that just last week was the third International Love Methods Week, and we've had for many years Love Data Week. There has been an annual Open Access Week. And starting 2 years ago, with last week being the third one, there is now a Love Methods Week, which is international series of week-long series of virtual events that talk about how to share our methods and the importance of doing so, and have a lot of guides and suggestions for best practices for doing that. So I think as a co-founder of Protocols.io, I have witnessed a really big change with the journals over the last 20 years and with the recognition of the importance of method sharing, particularly over the last 10 years. There's more and more awareness of the importance and need for sharing and for giving people, researchers, credit for method development. So Protocols.io, as I said, we launched in 2014 to help with this, and our goal is to make it easy to share method details with your colleagues when you're just doing research, and then to make it easier to publish your protocols and your method sections, write your papers, and to have a place that you can come back to and share corrections and optimizations. So that's the mission of Protocols.io. For those who are new to the platform, there are two sides. We'll focus mostly on the open access, free to read and free to publish side. So this is a repository, a little bit like Wikipedia or Figshare or Zenodo. This is the repository side of Protocols.io. Everything that you see public on Protocols.io, there is over 24,000 protocols, is free to read, free to publish. It is open access, CC BY, and all of that is free. And what we charge for is using Protocols.io in the private mode if you use it inside your team to collaborate. And so those are the two sides. And for this webinar, we will be focusing on the public sharing and what are the benefits, what are the reasons to do that, and how can you do it in an efficient manner. Again, for those who have not played around with Protocols.io, this is sort of a summary of what makes Protocols.io different. As I said, it's not a journal. And when you see a lot of the protocols on Protocols.io have very rich structure and formatting that makes it easy to navigate the protocols, to repeat the work, includes reagents and information that you need for repeating your own or somebody else's experiments. You will also notice We talk about commenting in terms of the different features. I'm not going to do a live demo of all the features, but just highlighting the most important ones. You will notice that on every protocol that you see, on every step, there is the ability to ask a question that will go to the authors, and conversations can happen right on the protocol discussions. And you build a sort of FAQ right on the protocol in the steps. Every protocol that you see, because it's open access and is meant for reuse and helping people to repeat work and build on the work, every protocol is sort of a template. So you'll see there is a copy fork button that allows you to make a copy of any protocol that you see in the public repository, those 24,000 public ones, and you can then edit it. And so if you're working with grasshoppers and I'm working with crickets, there might be small differences in the way we do the work. And you can use any protocol as a template, then make edits and change the steps as you use them. And when you publish a paper, you can make your forks public as well. And we try to give credit to the original authors and to people who are sharing the forks. But you can share easily and with precision exactly what you've done and how it's different from the work of others. So there's a lot of really nice functionality. We will leave that to the other webinars. And this is an example of commenting that's happening right on step 2 of this example protocol, where a scientist has a question, am I doing this right? And the professor from the university in Seattle is replying, and everyone can see this conversation because it's happening in public. Obviously, if you're commenting on private protocols, it's private, but on public protocols, you can comment publicly, and then you're building a sort of library of discussions that help everyone who is visiting and might have the same questions instead of answering them one by one. Okay, so that's all I'll say about the functionality. And if you're on Protocols.io and you want to share publicly, you actually have different ways of doing it. So we have a very good help center, and we talk about the different ways of sharing on Protocols.io. So one way is to simply share your protocol and make it public on Protocols.io itself. This is what we call standalone. So maybe you have small tweaks, maybe you have large changes to an existing protocol or something that's been developed in your lab for many years. You might not have the time to turn it into a paper, and that's fine. But by sharing on Protocols.io, you make it available to the world. You can get collaborators, people recognize you for your contributions. It's discoverable in Google Scholar. So this is very easy. And when you submit a protocol, we check it very quickly to make sure that there is no spam or pseudoscience, but we're not a journal. So if you add something to Protocols.io, it's likely to go live the next day. It has a DOI, can be cited. We'll say a little bit more about it. So that's the easiest and quickest way to share. But a lot of scientists, when they're using Protocols.io, they use it because the journal that they're submitting their research findings to is one of many, over 1,000 journals that recommends using Protocols.io for your method sections for reporting. So we'll dive into that in a couple of minutes, but a lot of people use Protocols.io to help with publishing their research papers to make them more reproducible and comply with expectations of funders and publishers. And the other part is, in addition to improving the research papers that you publish, There are now more and more partner journals of Protocols IO that connect to the ones I showed on the second slide of this presentation that welcome protocols that you may share on Protocols IO for actual peer review. So not just a research paper, but you can get your methods published. You might share them on Protocols IO and then send them if it's a significant contribution, if you've spent a lot of time getting something to work. As I said, there are more and more journals that welcome methods and protocols for peer review. And we'll talk about that in this presentation as well. And then for some Springer Nature journals, there's seamless, smooth integrations that are similar to what you see here when you're writing a paper, but it's actually integrated like the Journal of Nature Cell Biology. There is a seamless integration with the submission system. So when you're submitting your paper for review by the editors and for consideration, there is an easy way to include your protocols on some of the journals. So if you're on Protocols IO, you will see at the top of your protocol that you have a few different options for how to share your protocols publicly. And I'll say a few words about this. If you click the Publish button, you will see on what I'm showing on the right-hand side, you will see this flow come up. So there's 5 different tabs, basically, to fill out your authors, co-authors, for you to check, make sure that you have the abstract, that you've acknowledged the funders for the work, and then review your protocol, and in the end, confirm that your co-authors, your professor are ready to publish. So you'll never accidentally, if you click publish, don't worry, you're never accidentally going to make your protocol public. You go through this publishing flow. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. And then it goes into our queue. We review, and that same or next day, your protocol is live. So that's the publish button. If you're using Protocols IO to submit a research paper or to peer review your method, and you want to wait until your paper is accepted, you can put in the protocol and you can click the Reserve DOI button, which will take you through a similar flow. It will give you the DOI that you can put into your paper for the reviewers to be able to check your protocol. But what you'll notice is that it doesn't fully go live until you've published your paper and have come back to Protocols IO and made your protocol public. So it is a way to mention it in your paper and give a link to the editors and reviewers. It reserves the DOI, but that is not available in our search results or visible to Google. So it's a slightly different publishing flow that gives you the privacy until you're ready to share it. And another item that you'll see, another option that you have is what we call posting a draft, where maybe you're still working on the protocol, you're still refining it, but you want to share more quickly. Maybe there's a public health emergency. So you can share a draft which is still editable. It doesn't get a DOI. It's not meant for publishing papers, but it is a quick way to share with the world. And I'll talk about peer review options in a moment. So if we start on the research papers, this is a wonderful example of what we're starting to see more and more of, what we call modular publishing, where you're publishing the research paper and the story and the paper itself is at the center, but you have kind of like pieces of a puzzle fitting together. You have link outs from the paper to the data, to the code that you wrote, to the methods, possibly videos that accompany it. Your code might be on GitHub. if you have DNA protein sequences that goes into a database. And so we're starting to see more and more cases like this where the paper is the central story, but then you look at a data availability statement and you can see that plasmids that accompany this research have been deposited in a repository called AdGene. The protocols are on protocols.io. The database UniPro has information on the sequences that have been deposited in PDB, Protein Data Bank, at this link. So we're starting to see more and more of papers like this. And what you'll notice, what is interesting, is that there are many examples where the research paper has a list of authors, but when you go to the specific protocols that are linked to from this paper, you will notice that the order of the authors is different. So this is a way to highlight by sharing on protocols.io. The paper links to protocols.io. If you come to protocols.io, there is a link back to the paper in Nature Communications, but you'll see who exactly developed the protocol, who actually did the work, and it may be different from the author order here in the paper itself. So it's giving more fine-grained information and credit on who actually worked on the technique, right? And in this example, uh, this paper that is published is actually in a subscription journal, but by sharing the protocols on protocols.io, those are opened up, and they are open access, so they're more discoverable. More of the world can easily get to them, even if they don't have subscription to the research paper itself. And it increases reproducibility and reuse. And going back to the original slide on the increase in peer review options and journals that are dedicated to publishing protocols, there is a growing list on protocols.io next to those publish buttons. You'll see a button on any protocol that you create called peer review options. This started in 2021 with the journal Plus One being the first one and the only one in this dropdown, but it's been quickly expanding to partner journals that welcome protocols that have had significant work on them getting something to work. Maybe instead of doing something in 2 weeks, it took you 2 months or a year to get a protocol to work, and you want credit for it. You want to share it with the world. You want other people to save a year of work and be able to do their research faster. So these are journals that welcome submissions from protocols.io for peer review, right? And they're not, what's interesting is they're not necessarily expecting new results, new discoveries. They're expecting a new method or an optimized method that works in a different organism or maybe works in a more cost-efficient fashion, but it's about methods that work, not yet necessarily about research results. And over the years, there are a lot of people that have shared on protocols.io and then gotten their protocol peer reviewed. For some of them, if you're a graduate student, you may be still 3, 4 years from publishing your first research paper, but this allows you to get credit and get your first paper as an author years before you may have research results. And it's just a way to accelerate science and get additional peer-reviewed publications even before you've made the discoveries with the methods that you have been developing and tweaking and getting them to work. And what we find is that many of the authors that share in this way, they actually come back and then share more protocols and turn them into papers. So it's with many of those journal partners that I showed on the previous page, it's a very rewarding, positive experience. They're not trying to reject your paper, they're trying to improve it and judge whether it's uh, not judge whether it's high impact factor enough, but they're trying to judge, um, is it a substantial contribution? Did you put a lot of work into it? And does it look like this method works rather than rejecting your paper because it doesn't have the promise of X number of citations. So it tends to be a very good experience. And here's an example from plus one where the protocol links to the paper, and the paper has a prominent button saying view the protocol. It has extra introduction, references, right? It is a fully peer-reviewed paper, but the protocol is at the heart of this publication. Okay. There are examples from different journals that we have. And if you'd like to hear more, there is a link here to a recording of a webinar with senior editors from these different partner journals and from researchers and professors who have gone through this flow, published papers on their experiences around getting their methods peer reviewed, what's different between this and just a research paper. So if you're interested in more information, there is a link to a recording of this webinar. Right? I do want to make sure that we have time for Q&A in the end. So I won't spend too much more time talking about peer reviewing your protocols other than to say that we are seeing not just biomedical protocols, but this example is a research technique that is from anthropology. And we do see a diverse set of protocols that people are sharing in these journals. It's not all just biomedical. And in the example from this author on this paper, it's interesting to look at the timeline where he shared the protocol originally during the pandemic year in 2020, and then a year later turned it into a peer-reviewed article. So version one was shared on Protocols.io with input of the peer review process, then shared version two of the protocol, published the paper. And a year and a half later, in September of this year, the paper is fixed, but the protocol evolved. They had advances that make it more efficient relative to what they shared in 21. So in September 22, they published a third version on Protocols.io. And you can keep doing this as much as you need. The paper is still there. Everyone can see the original version that was published, but if you land on these earlier versions on Protocols.io, you'll have a notification saying that there's version 3 or 4 or 5, and you'll be able to navigate and see updates to the protocol. Right? And speaking of the recognition, this is the quote from the scientist who published the paper saying, when we interviewed about the experience of peer reviewing the method, and said that this is early recognition in my career, and it was the first paper as a first author that this researcher published. Right? When you share on Protocols.io, it's not just citations of your paper, but what you'll see on Protocols.io is that every protocol you share has a metrics tab where we report to you how many people viewed your protocol, how many people bookmarked it, how many people made copies of it. So everything we can see about the use and reuse, if we catch that your protocol was cited in any publication, we add it to the metrics tab. So we're trying to report to you and to people that might be using your protocol. We're trying to report everything we know about the use and attention and reuse of your protocol. All right. Um, and I also want to highlight, this is not about peer reviewing a protocol, but I want to highlight one of my favorite examples of sharing in a research paper. And this has to do with a paper in the journal GigaScience. It's a research paper. And it's an example of increasing the discoverability and reuse of your protocols. So in this example, a researcher from Chile is asking on social media, does anybody have a protocol to do something in primary cortical neuron culture? So this is in neuron cells. And a scientist from California says, I see a few versions of such protocols on protocols.io, and here's the one that should work for you, and adds a link. And what I love about this example is that if you look at this protocol, it's actually from this GigaScience paper on parasites of three-spine stickleback fish. And what's amazing is that the scientist who's looking for it is looking for a protocol for cortical neuron cultures. The chances that he would be reading this paper on parasites of stickleback fish is close to zero. But because the authors improved the reproducibility of their paper and they didn't just add it as a supplementary PDF, but put the protocol into protocols.io and link to it from the methods section, their protocol is discoverable and can be used outside of their specific research field, right? So not only did they make their paper more reproducible, but they made their protocol more discoverable for reuse by those outside of their field. And this is one of many examples that we have of such sharing, but it means that your protocol has discoverability beyond those who are reading the research paper itself. Right? And as I get towards the end and open up for questions, I also wanted to share from a professor in Australia, Professor Martelotto at University of Adelaide, a statement. He's been sharing a lot of protocols, not through journals, but just directly on protocols.io. And I love when he said that 80% of his recent collaborations have been a direct result of sharing their protocols publicly on protocols.io. So again, because they're discoverable, because people are asking you questions, they strike up collaborations, conversations. You can end up collaborating on research questions just because you're sharing your method. So this is an intrinsic reward of just making your protocols public, even if you're not then turning them into full peer-reviewed papers. We'll share these slides and I'll just finish. I'll just finish by saying that I should correct this to 1,000 plus. There are now a lot, over 1,000 journals that explicitly recommend sharing in author guidelines, sharing your methods on protocols.io. There are more and more funders, as I said, that expect when they give a research grant, expect the grantees to share the detailed protocols. And there are more and more universities that are partnering with protocols.io to make it free to use in the premium mode as well. And we will stop here and just remind to those that are joining a little late, we'll remind everyone that There are several other webinars that we conduct every month. You can also watch previous recordings. There are live webinars that we run every month, not just this one about getting credit. There is also a fantastic help center if you're new to Protocols.io and are looking for functionality. And we have a lot of really nice 1 to 2 minute video tutorials that show different parts of Protocols.io. And last but not least, if you want a one-on-one demo or have specific questions as you use the platform, if you go to this link, again, we'll share the slides. You don't have to scramble to write down on paper the links that are here. Everyone who's attending the webinar will get the slides, but at this link, you can connect one-on-one with one of our scientists. And we are also really good at answering questions that come to our email inbox. So if we don't get to something today, if you have any questions as you use Protocols.io, take advantage of these resources or email us and we'll be happy to help out. All right. Um, we also welcome if you have 2 minutes at some point, once we share the slides. We collect feedback about the webinars that we conduct, what has been helpful, and what we can improve for future ones. So we welcome the feedback as well. And with that, we will open up for Q&A. And I think there is one question already in the Q&A. So there is thank you so much, Torasani, for the question. And this is a student in mathematics who says that they've just joined recently Protocols.io and submitted a research paper. And the question is Protocols.io also available for students to gain more experience? So uh, we have high school students that use Protocols.io, undergraduate students, graduate students, depending on where you are. As I said, all the public sharing is free. Everyone can create an account and test and start using Protocols.io, but you're limited to using it for private organization and development. That's where you need a subscription. But if this is for undergraduate use, if this is for students, if there isn't sufficient funding in your research team or at your university, please email us at info@protocols.io. We have a waiver program. Um, Depending on where you are in the world, we're also members of Research for Life. So certain countries, universities in certain countries get Protocols.io for free if they're in developing countries and cannot afford it. But there are even occasions when a lab in United States is new, doesn't have funding yet, or they didn't get their grant. And if you get in touch with us, we can always help out and make sure that you can use Protocols.io. And of course, for public sharing, it's completely free. But it's your platform. And we do also see even high school students using it, not just college. There is a question about another question in the chat about the recording. Absolutely, everyone who registered for the webinar is going to get the recording. It's somewhere in the beginning that I mentioned, and the slides um, from this webinar. So yes, we will definitely share that. I will also stop the recording now.